And so, hello everybody, greetings. My name is David Edelson. I'm the virtual Dinesh for this week. Welcome to the ENG webinar. We have a wonderful presentation this week with Sheeba Prakash who's a data architect at the IBM Chief Data Office. And her topic to present this week is data curation. And I will hand it over to Sheeba. Please introduce yourself, any other background, and welcome, and happy to have you here. Please give us your insights into this.
Thanks, David. Yes, hi everyone. As Dave mentioned, I'm a data architect here in the Chief Data Office. I work with data a lot, so I prepared this presentation with my experience as well as my research on this topic. Hopefully that will be helpful to you. And let me share my screen. So I have what I'll start with is, what is data curation, why it's important to do data curation, and then I will go in, tell a little bit about details of how it's being done, what a data curator does when the data is obtained, right? So data curation, the definition of the data curation is everything that you do to the data so that it is accessible for the user so that they can go and use the data. It is findable by the user. Like when somebody looks for a data for their AI or machine learning algorithm to um, uh, access, they should be able to find it. And when they find it, they should say, this is the data that I was looking for, right? That's the whole purpose of data curation. And it involves various steps. The major steps being create, organize, and maintain the data. For the creating the data, when you go ahead and collect the data from various sources, depending on your study, on the project that you're involved in, it may involve like going to multiple websites or to a data lake where the data is stored, and searching for them and getting them, validating that it is indeed the data that you want, and then preserving them. And then you go into organizing the data, right? This involves indexing, cataloging, structuring the data, adding metadata, etc. in this step. And the whole life cycle of the data, from the time that the data is created to the time that it is archived, right? So one needs to maintain the data. And to maintain the data, we have to check whether it is accurate over time. What is the relevance of the data? Is the data still relevant? Is it still reliable? Is it still accessible? As the access controls needs to be changed with time, or maybe the regulations have changed, maybe the security has to be updated, those ones. These are some of the various tasks involved in data curation. Cleaning and processing of data, documenting the metadata, quality assurance and consistency, data storage and retrieval. I will go one by one here. Let's take the first one, cleaning and processing of data, right? Collect relevant data. When a project is in project, or when an organization decides to have the data to be collected, your sources, you have to decide which data source to go for, whether it is all through the web, scanning through all the websites there, or is it data lakes, or if it is sensitive data where the data is stored may be different. So purpose of the data has to be first established. What is the AI model? What is the AI data that I have to collect? And try to collect data so that it's more diverse. And this is because to avoid bias for the model, when you have the AI modeling, it's important to have data from multiple sources covering multiple aspects. And remove irrelevant or redundant data. So that if there's duplicates or it's not relevant to your project, it's important to remove them. Deal with missing data. So for example, if there is when we are dealing with historic data, right, some of the data points may be missing. So in that cases, we may decide not to use the entire row of information there, or we may augment it. We may update it with the in estimating a data and updating it. Standardize the data, right? The reason that we have to standardize the data is like using some of the published standards like Dublin Code or Darwin Code for biology is because this helps the organizations, different business units, to be able to share the same data for multiple purposes, and also reusable in future, as well as they can be interoperable. An example is like, when we have birds, species of birds, and their diet of the birds being studied, for example, researchers may focus on the diet of the bird and the on specific species. For the business, it may be like, what is the bird feeds? So if it is a domestic bird, what is the bird feed that has to be that is corresponding to that, and then subsequently it may also be supply chain demand where the shipment of the bird feeds. So all these data can be interoperable, and connecting helps in the further analyzing and better AI modeling. Remove out Next one is remove outliers. Normalizing the data is important so that you get the distribution correct, and if there are data that goes outside, let's remove them. Normalize the data with some of the standard processing so that it doesn't go way beyond the distribution. Transform the data. This again, as I was telling about the standards, right? If we have a data standard established that irrespective of the sources, the other organizations may have different standards that they have followed, but once we have this specific organization or group or team has decided on a data standard, that data could be transformed so that it is more accessible. Validate the data. That is, make sure that that is indeed the data. Then you can also there are several automated tools that is available for various steps of this, but sometimes asking the questions and augmenting or updating may require manual intervention, the role of which is called the data curator. Here I have the picture of two birds, which is very closely related species. And in order to find the difference between the birds, it's the color of the feathers, or some structural differences, but very closely related birds. And we are in order to so the clarity of the picture is important. High resolution picture makes it more sharper for us to have more visibility of, like, for example, the beak is a little bit different in the two birds. Then having these bounding box, right, that is a technique that we use when you want the subject to be highlighted. And if you have gray and while the subspecies may be differentiated with the color of the feathers, then if you have a gray or black and white picture, that may not help. That's the time that you remove the that becomes redundant, or delete the data that is not needed, or if there is duplicate pictures, you remove them as well. Here is another picture where the bounding box is identifying the subject of interest here. It's an Australian king parrot here. And it has some background here, like there's some background noise. So we put the bounding box for the bird here. This is also the one in the middle here, that's also an Australian parrot. But it's in the landscape format. So the decision is to keep all the images in the portrait format. This will be removed. As a pure data curator, I'll go ahead and remove the this way. I also have on the left, rightmost is another Australian bird. Uh, I don't. It's the. It's called Rosella, and I may be wrong here, but the differences between the two birds um, is in the color of the feather. Like this is green and this is more blue, and the color of the beak also is slightly different. And in order to identify those features, having high resolution, no background, sometimes we remove the background so that we can focus on the subject a little bit more. And that's where, if for this picture, I remove the background, I got the bird separated out. And we, as a data curator, I may also play around with the a contrast or shadow or different aspects of the um, code that's called, updating or augmenting the picture a little bit. If I have a picture which is, for example, it's flipped, right? Um, I use the rotation feature to basically bring it to the right format. So, and here I have another picture of a bird, but it again has a background. It's a little bit difficult to noticeable, especially in the grayscale or the black and white, where algorithms could uh, miss it. In that case, the bounding box um, will bring the subject um, to focus, and also removing the background will also help here. And so those are some of the changes or updates as a data curator does. I took the images to go through these, and I have to say I got all these beautiful pictures from pexel.com. There is a free downloadable site. Um, and if we go into the next step here, right, for the curation, we have what's called documenting its metadata. Let's go through what is needed in identifying the relevant metadata. We have to use a metadata standard as it's important to set that metadata standard, because that's going to be the searchable character that will come in. Create a metadata record, include all necessary information, update the metadata record, store and share the metadata record, right? How we do it, like, let me just take you through an example here, right? So in the image, in this specific image here, right? So we can also embed the metadata in addition to creating metadata in a table or in a spreadsheet. So here in this case, if the metadata is, if you right click on the images, it will show where the sources or kind of image, etc. Some basic metadata information is there, and comments could be added. There's also a text in front of it, which was added. The curator can decide whether to keep the text or to remove the text. So either metadata could be embedded, or it could be in a different sheet altogether. Here is some examples of metadata, right? For a study that is focused on birds and their diet, I'm going with the bird example here, use case here. So the the species of the bird species and their diet is of importance here for the uh, researcher. So they go in. This is a small metadata set that they focus on, right? They document the birds, the species, the diet. Another example here, which is the Dublin Code format for an image. You have an image in the JPEG format. Date. There's no confusion here if the date is defined as year, and month, date. So every data set will contain the same data format. This helps in standardizing that. The creator, so there will be guidelines like write the creator's name starting with the capital, etc. Then the title, right? And I have this here. Let me just. So this is from this Sustainable Heritage Network organization site, where the Dublin Code standards and various details of each standard is given. So we have the title of a name is given to the resource, right? This is for an image. What is the Dublin Code standards for an image? The creator, name of the person, start with the capital letter, etc. And subject, topic, description, how each one should be written, and there are guidelines for documenting it. Having or documenting these guidelines and the standards is important for a proper data curation, and the format, type, identifier, etc. And when we choose a metadata scheme, right, what it is being used for and what it will it be used for is also important. That's what will help you to decide. So asking these questions: what is the study for? What is the project for? And what is important? Whether it's the background of a picture that is important, or is it for in some cases, for example, in the image that I shared before on the birds, we removed the background, but in some cases the background is important because that tells whether it is summer or winter, or in some cases it may be night or dark or in daytime. Those kind of information may be important. So depending on the data and its usage, questions needs to be asked and collected. Dating the photograph, sometimes you can date the curator can date the photograph looking at the picture or some backgrounds or the hairstyle, for example. But at the same time, when the assumptions are made, depending on, I'm dating this picture to be from 1990s, or because of the hairstyle, right? That has to be documented. Describing photographs, the description of the photographs should be can be part of the metadata. And embedded metadata we covered. Another example that I wanted to share for the metadata is from my spreadsheet. This is the eBird taxonomy, right? Which is published from the Cornell University. There's different species of the birds here with their categories specified, the primary common name, and the species group, etc. In some case studies, the species group is all that matters. They don't go into the sub species to know more details into the there are subspecies among the species. It's species group that may not be important. So depending on the studies and the cases, it'll be people will have different interests there. And the same thing when it is again from Cornell University. This is called Clemens taxonomy on the birds. And you can see that it's slightly different, right? So they have if I take the categories, there are species, subspecies, group, and monotypic. And if I take the other one, right, if it's the species are the way that it is being categorized is slightly different, right? Domestic, formed, hybrid, intergrade, ISSF. So it's important for the organization or the group to decide which is the standard that I'm going to follow, which is the taxonomy that you pick and decide, and then stick with that across the organization. Going back to my spreadsheet, this one. Okay. So as I was talking about, so far I was talking about the images. Let me switch a little bit to the document processing, right? So when we have documents, uh, which are scanned documents, for example, right? They may come with some watermarks. In this specific case, there's the watermark draft there. So removing this watermarks helps in the processing. Some of the OCR engines, optical character recognition engines, will do this pre-processing and take the document and read it carefully, the draft. But for a data curator, it may mean that you remove the watermark from when saving the document. That doesn't mean that if this, instead of the draft, if you had like confidential, right? That doesn't mean that you're removing the confidentiality of the document. It's just that the digital content will be saved as without the watermark, but it will be documented in the metadata or in the compliance governance piece of it, how the document is to be handled. On the right, I have the document which has which is called it's tilted, and not just it is tilted, the page is not complete. Some part of the previous page is there, this page is not complete. So as a data curator, I want to make the pages consistent. So it's called deskewing, and I'll make the document straight, as well as also take care of the document for the pages to be consistent as well. All right. That is on the document processing. And since we talked about text, I don't want to stop without saying, giving examples on the text examples. For data curations, for example, the address could be, people write address input address in different format. So having a standard format and updating it to the right format will be to have a standard like that, right? Yeah. Another common example is VP of market, the roles in an organization, VP of marketing. So as will be converted to vice president of marketing. This just some simple examples of text curation. So with that, I'll go over to the next one, which is quality assurance. See, we covered, we want data standards. We will provide guidelines, like this has to be updated in this specific, following this Dublin Core standard or Darwin's core standard, and then having you update the date with this specific format, save the images in JPEG, or have portraits, data standards. Data validation techniques have to be applied. There are some it can be automated, or it can, in some cases, whether you're depending on things that you're analyzing, it can involve manual intervention as well. Implementing data cleaning process, we covered this. Standardized data formats, establish. This will ensure that these are all steps that's needed to ensure that the quality is consistent, and we over time establish data governance process, monitor the data quality. It's also important for the data governance, because the regulations, if there are private information or secure information based on the data classification of the organization, it can be different. And accordingly, the data has to be protected, secured, or governed as such. Access controls may need to be put in place as well. Monitor the data quality, having some dashboard or alerts set up, so that if some data changes happen, the data curator can go and apply the changes, or For example, if one of the birds become extinct, that has to be updated as such, or if there is a removal of a data point may be needed if it is a personal information and the person moved from one place to another, it may be a change of address that has to be uh, done. So the, the final step here, data storage and retrieval. Go into it. So there are so many different types of storage that is available, and what is the best way to decide, right? Again, and what is the data that you're handling? What is it? Images? It is videos? Or what is the frequency of the access? Is it more frequently accessed, or is it transactions, um, or also on sensitivity of the data, right? So relational databases, this is very good for transactional data. So where you can use SQL queries to retrieve the data from these databases, and it is consistent. NoSQL databases, this this is good for that are unstructured, right? The but it may not be so suitable for the transactional data where consistency may get compromised. There is cloud object storage, cloud storage, Amazon S3, AWS S3, and IBM cost bucket storage, Google cloud storage. It could be used for large data that's available from anywhere and also accessible from anywhere, and also yeah, images or videos could be stored there as well. File systems, NFS, SMP file systems, you can put a fair amount of data there, files, etc. there, and it provides access controls to a good extent. You can access it from other clients. Data warehouses, when you have large amount of data, you want to look into data warehouses. Content delivery networks, again, for where Akamai, CloudShare, these are available when you have streaming data, right? So depending on the data and the usage, you want to look at these. And along with the storage comes the backup and archive plan for the data as well. Again, based on your data, you may you will want to develop your backup plan. You can have it in multiple locations, or you can have single backup or multiple backup, online, real-time backup, or it can be the frequency of the backup could be different as well, like maybe daily or even minutes, or some data, if it's not that critical, it may be on a weekly or monthly basis as well. The access control is important for the backup data as well. So because the regulatory guidelines apply the same there. Having reviewed the backup and archive plans regularly. So let me just make sure that I have covered all the data curation workflow here. We did talk about documenting the data. Now the metadata is to be documented, where the sources, what has to be, assumptions that we are making, etc. Asking questions. It's important to ask the questions. What is important for the study, for the project? Depending on that is what our data curator will decide. Translate into standard format. We went through some of the Dublin Core and Darwin Core kind of standard forms. There's so many standards depending on the data again. Um, assessing fairness and cleaning and validating, we went through this. Fair, right? That's assessing fairness. Data, is the data findable? Is the data accessible? Is the data interoperable, right? When we covered the data for bird and the diet, we talked about how data is used by the business for bird feeds, and that data may be combined with bird feeds, and subsequently the supply chain or the schedule of shipments, right? So how the data are interoperable and reusable. It has to be, that's the whole purpose of doing the data curation, so that data is reused in future. So that brings me to I did not cover the products of the tools. I specifically did not. The I wanted to focus on the best practices, why we need to do what, uh, data curation, how it plays into the AI and machine learning. That's the reason that I specifically, there are very many tools available, automated tools available, specific to different data, as well as the data processing, desqueuing, or image data curation, etc. So I can find that information. If any specific information is needed, I can find that as well. With that, that brings us to the end of this presentation, and I can take questions.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Sheeba. Wonderful presentation. Start with a couple of questions that were in the chat. I don't know, Abe, do you want to ask your question verbally?
Yes, I was, and thanks for this presentation. I was looking for what are the standards that one should look for apart from the Dublin core.
Core is for network resources standard. It's called the network. There is ISO 19115 for geospatial data, and there is Darwin core for biology related data. So depending on the data, there's so many different data standards, and based on your studies and the data that you're looking for, it could be different standards that you want to apply.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. And if there's anything specific, if you have a specific topic that you are looking for information, please ping me and I can get you that corresponding standards as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. And Surya, you had a question?
Yes. Can you hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, that's good. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. And I just had this simple question about, are there any open source tool that you can use to remove watermarks from the PDF document, or let's say to convert the skewed data into the unskewed one? Any kind of suggestions for those kind of tools?
So many of these OCR engines, right, optical character recognition engines, are capable of doing this. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Just a follow-up question, small follow-up question from this. So when you said skewed, does that mean only the original PDF? Or let's say if I take a picture of a PDF, now that picture is a bit skewed. Can I transform that?
Yeah, that's how this OCR process, one image at a time could be done as well, or the PDF document.
Oh, wow.
That depends on like you can choose the input to the OCR.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Thanks very much, Sheeba. Any other questions? Joe, did you have a question or?
Oh, okay. I had a question. Sanjay, I heard you had mentioned at one point that governance models needed to be applied. And when I heard that, I thought it was kind of general. I was wondering if this was something you had thought about, or if it's an area of future work.
So data governance, right? So it's basically data, how the data curator works with the extended IT and the security team. So once you have, for example, a data which is considered to be confidential, right? So that may be, if become part of the metadata that you're applying. It's confidential data, the access control to it, right? That it may be restricted access to that. So, or personal information, sensitive personal information. So you may up that information as a data curator, it is the classification of the data that will be documented, right? The real governance side, yeah, the security team will handle, like, who has access controls, what has to be done to ensure that it meets the, for example, the GDPR regulations, right, or the CCPA regulation. Those are not at data curators. They work with the data curators, work with these extended teams in the governance team to establish that. I hope I have answered. It's
Yeah, so no, that makes sense. So I think what would be interesting would be to use that metadata in the work that we're doing in the secure connectivity working group to actually implement the security. So you're collecting metadata that represents the security characteristics of data, and if we can actually then implement that in the network, then we have a complete picture, right?
Exactly. The rich, like for the metadata, what we say is like rich metadata, right? Where it is rich with information. There is complete metadata, which is entire information there, or it may be skeleton kind where the scope is very limited. So depending on the data and the study and the metadata that is decided, and the budget, of course, and then depending on that, the metadata could be populated.
Thank you.
I know security and governance is, it's a big topic by itself. Yes.
Very interesting topic. One that's very important when implementing these things. So thank you. Thank you. I think there's some very interesting work that can be done there.
Very good. Phil, you had a question? Phil P, can you unmute, or you want me to ask your question? Okay, well, Phil wrote, doesn't removal of outliers during normalization remove the most interesting data points?
So when we are normalizing the data, right? Like there are, for example, if we are looking at the history of salary of a person, and every month it is $1,000, and there is an outlier there. In the month of June, there is 10,000. That's a flag by itself. The data curator can look up. It could be the result of a typo, or it could be the big bonus, right? So um, for the uh, model to work, right? Having too many SKUs there, like too many outliers can result in in your 99% of the data is $1,000, and if the one data becomes a 10,000, that can result in the average salary, or if you take the mean for the person's salary, it may not make sense in the study if the study is focused on what is this person's salary per month. That's what I was going for.
Very good. I mean, as you're saying, it either, I mean, depending on, most interesting, I mean, Phil put that in quotes, but it could be something that's, and it's statistically significant either way, but it could be, as I said, relevant, or it could be an outlier that actually is should be curated from the data, because it actually, disturbs the statistics or the analysis that one actually is trying to perform.
Great. And on the other hand, if the question is on like when does a person gets a bonus paid, maybe those again, what is the data that you're looking for? What is your study? What is the focus? These are the questions that data curator keeps asking and asking again. That will get you the best information. Like I was showing the picture of the landscape and the portraits. Most of the images are in the portrait, and if you have few outliers like landscape pictures, even though that picture is very beautiful, we have to get rid of that one to go preserve the integrity of the others.
Okay, very, very good. So anybody else have any questions? The other? And one's going to ask. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks, Sheeba, for this
Thank you, David.
excellent, very interesting talk.
Thank you. It's very interesting.
Sorry about the
Super
initial
cool.
technical difficulties that I had with the sharing.
No,
Thanks.
no worries. No problem. So thanks. We'll see how we can incorporate this, as I said, into the ENG. Thanks for participating, and thanks for everybody coming this week for the this weekly ENG webinar. And as the virtual Dinesh, say thank you to everybody, and have a wonderful morning or afternoon, evening, depending where you are, and a wonderful week. And see everybody for the next webinar. So thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.